All right, welcome everyone. It looks like we've got about 10 people here tonight. So this is the last session. This is session 9. As I said last night, there's no slides for tonight. We're just going to work on some challenges, but I'm also happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the course so far or what next steps might look like. I did point out a little bit earlier here, session 7 is up. I will upload session 9 tonight as soon as it's done, basically converting to the video file once the Zoom meeting ends, and I'll get that up, and hopefully both session 8 and 9 will be up prior to everyone going on vacation tomorrow. So we are going to tackle the employee data challenge tonight. This is pretty much like the toughest challenge in the list of challenges, give or take some of the recursive ones. And if we want to, we can maybe play with some of the recursive ones tonight. But employee data is like the last normal one before we hit the recursive ones. And it is a bit of a monster. The first time I went through this, I definitely struggled with it. So we're gonna, and I didn't use I've never done the prep with this before. So we'll go ahead and we're gonna talk through this, and maybe that'll help guide how we're gonna write the code. While I'm doing this, there is gonna be multiple steps. So I'm probably gonna go back and clean things up and show things a couple of different ways where we could tackle it with a for loop or maybe a built-in, maybe even look at turning it into a higher order function that uses helper functions to accomplish the tasks that we need to set forth. And then, like I said, anyone that has any questions, anything like that. But my guess is, depending on how quickly I move and how many questions everyone has, this will probably take anywhere from like 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half to get through, but we'll see here. So we'll go ahead and go through the instructions, and then we'll do the prep, and then we'll start laying out some code. So you're a new programmer at your company. Your CFO needs some data regarding all the employees. Your CFO needs to know the number of employees per job title, the average salary for the job title within the company, the average bonus that job title receives within the company, and the average total compensation for that job title. You're given an array of objects that represents all the employees in the company. You need to parse through all the employee data and return an array of objects that represent each job title and the corresponding compensation data, including title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, and average total comp. Excuse me. And that is, all of this is going to be per position, right? And so this is the example of the input data that we're going to be given. So here's our array, and our array is an array of objects. And then within each object, we have key value pairs. It looks like we're going to have a name, which is a string, title, which is also going to be a string, and then salary and bonus are both numbers, right? And so see, Joe's a developer, salary of 125K, bonusing 15,000. And we can go through here and keep looking. So we've got another developer, we've got a project manager, another developer, a designer, another product manager, and another designer, right? And when we're done manipulating this data, we need to have example output that looks like this. So for the job position developer, we're going to have a total of 3 employees. The average salary is 127,333. Average bonus is 13,000, and average total comp is 140,333. So again, average total comp is just these two added together. And we have the same object for product manager, and again, a corresponding object for designer. Any questions on what our scope is, and from the instructions and just kind of looking at our data. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab this. And we'll use this as an example. So the employee data is already defined over here as an array of objects. And so we've already got access to that. And within our prep, let's take a look here. Right. And all right, so our return this time is going to look like this. Right, so this is, and again, there'll be one for product manager and one for designer. Right, and so these will also be inside objects. All right, so we are getting a one input parameter, which is an array of objects that represent each employee and their corresponding data. All right, and so let's see here. I'm sorry, that is return. So example, and we're the example is going to be just our function call with our with the array of employees. I think it's called employee data. So we'll do this, and let's go ahead and set this up and say console.log get employee data, and we're going to give it employee data. All right, so let's just go ahead and right off the bat, let's just make sure that everything's passing through here. All right, so it looks like we're no typos, so that's a good start. Okay, so pseudocode. All right, so we will need a object. So let me talk about this here real quick. We're going to basically organize this data by the position, right? So when I look at this, this is the unique thing here, right? So like we're going to have multiple employees, like those counts are variable, that this is static, right? So the title is not going to change on us. If the title changes, it gets grouped into a different object, right? Like all of these are just summaries of the people that hold this position, but this position for us is what we're going to key in on and build things off of. So does anyone that hasn't solved this already want to take a stab at, we're going to keep it in an object, but does anyone want to take a stab at what the key value pair may look like? I don't know if that's how you spell relevant, probably not. And it is. Look at that. It's one of those words when I look at it, I never know if I'm spelling it right or not. So does anyone want to take a stab at what this would look like? All right, so if we know that this is going to be the unique part, right? So we should make this the key, right? So the key is going to be, we'll do it by title, right? Or by, yeah, by title, right? So that's the key inside of our object. So what do we now need to put in here? Right, we need to track salary, right? We need to track bonus. And we need to track the number of employees that we have in each position. Right, because eventually we need to find out average, we need to get averages, right? So we're going to add in everyone's salary, everyone's bonus, and then we're going to need to keep track of how many employees contributed that total so we can divide and get the average. So with this, we get name, which is unneeded. We get title, which will become our key. Salary, we will total. So we can find average. Bonus, same as above. And then we need employee count, which we will need to create. All right. So that's the first part of this, right? So I'm going to see what I can do to code this out and get to here, right? And so we will need a case that handles the first time we get a title, so a new key. We will need a case that handles each subsequent time we come across the same key, so we don't overwrite data. All right. So what is this telling us right here? What type of a building block are we going to need to get to handle this? You guys are stonewalling me tonight. Anyone?
Would it be a recursion? I don't know.
No, not. So as a building block, right? So we've got variables, we've got iteration loops, and we've got conditional logic, right? Those are like the three things that we use. So and I'm giving the answer away, but if one thing happens, we want to do this, else we do this, right?
Conditional, I assume.
Right. So you guys are alive. I was like, this is going to go really fast and we're not going to have a lot to talk about if you don't ask questions.
So the if gets the key and the else gets the value, correct? Is that what you said?
No, what I'm saying is that the first time we come across, so when we're going through here, right? So when I iterate through employee data, the first time I come in here and I get to the title of developer, I need to add the salary, the bonus, and the and the bonus, and I need to record that information. And if I do that to every single one, every time I run into developer, I'm just going to overwrite the data, right? And so, and I'll show you here as I write this, but so I need one thing to happen the first time I hit developer, and I need a different thing to happen every other time I get developer, right? So the first time I'm just going to be recording it and creating a key. Every time after that, I'm just going to be incrementing the salary and the bonus, right? And those are two different actions. The first one will only happen once. The second time will happen every other time we run into the developer. So like in this case A needs to happen one time for the first developer, and then case B needs to happen the second time when we hit Kelly, and then a third time when we hit Amber, right? And then same thing for each of the other groups as well, right? So so that's going to be an if else statement. So we'll stop with the pseudocode here, and I think this is enough to get me through the first part, which is assembling my object that I can then later use to populate the other information that I need. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, so I'm going to give myself my object. So we'll call this, we'll call it parsed employees, right? And this is just going to be an empty object for right now, right? So now I need to loop through my array of employees here. So let's go ahead and do for let I equal 0, I less than R of employees dot length, right? So that's our parameter name. So that's our incoming one here. And then we'll increment. So we'll say I plus plus. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we get here. So let's do console.log R of employees I. And let's see what that looks like. And we're gonna cancel out our return for right now. All right, so there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, right? So we can make this look. So we could say oops. Oh, what did I do here? Well, either way, we see that each thing is coming through as its own object here, which is what I'm shooting for. So get rid of all of this extra overhead here. And so now I need to create keys, right? And so how, does anyone remember how we create a key for a object?
So that would be like the, the dot title equals array of employees iteration title.
Yep. So and I'm not going to use any dot notation. I'm just going to use brackets for everything, especially because there is a trap there where you could use dot notation for all of these, but once you turn this into a key, because there's a space in there, you'll see it when I create the keys. Like you won't be able to use dot notation for product manager. You have to use bracket notation. But let's see here. So creating a new key for an object, JS. Right. So basically I'm just giving it the object with my key name. All right, so I am going to have my object, which is parsed employees. And then I'm going to have to add bracket notation, and I'm getting R of employees, I, right? So when I do that, I'm getting the entire thing here, right? So I'm getting the entire object. And next I need the title, right? So I can do R of employees, I, and then title. And so let's go ahead and console.log this as well, just to make sure we're getting what we think we are. Undefined. So I've got a typo here. Parsed employees. Well, it's probably undefined because I'm not giving it a key value pair. So if I take this out and console.log it, hopefully I should see an iteration of just the names going through. All right, so developer, developer, product manager, developer. So that's good. All right, so I know that this is going to give me my object key, right? And so now what I need to do is, there's my key. I need to assign it a value. And I'm going to assign the value here. And let me give myself a little bit extra space here, because this is going to get long, right? So my value is going to be an array with the salary, bonus, and my employee count, right? And so for salary, it's basically going to be the same thing as title, right? I just need to do this. And bonus is going to be the same thing. And then the first time I do this, it's going to be a 1, right? So now I'm going to show you what I was talking about by overwriting keys here. So we'll do salary, and we'll come down here and we'll do bonus, and then we've got our employee count. So now let's go ahead and, instead of returning R of employees, we're going to return parsed employees. And let's see what we get here. Right, so there's my key. So now, like I said, we've only got 1s here, and we've got basically the last value, right? So I came in, created the title or the key of developer, gave it salary bonus of 125 and 15, right? And then I overwrote it with this, and then finally I overwrote it with this. Oh, sorry, that's product manager, last one, with this 122 and 16.5. So I see the last developer's salary, right? So now I know I've got one of my cases here, right? And so what I can do is I can say, if parsed, let's see here, check if object as key JS. Right, and I believe I'm going to use the, so I can have key in my object, or I can use has own property key, right? And so my object has own property key. So I can grab this and put this here and say, if parsed employees has own property, and it's going to be this. And make sure I'm all lined up here. And we'll hit that, and then we'll say else. And we're going to make this our else case. And so let me clean this up here real quick. And so now what we're going to do is, if basically it already exists in there. So if that's true, that we've already hit the first developer and we've put it in there, So instead of overwriting it, we're going to say, let's see here. Let's see here. So we're going to increment. So we're going to say, how are we going to access it? Think about this here for a second. We're going to say parsed. Let me just copy this. I think we go, oh boy. How am I going to tackle this? I need to access each individual metric now. So I need to update. Oh, here, let's take a look at this once real quick. So let's say, let's wrap this in a console.log. Console.log. And let's throw 0 in here, right? Because this is my key, and this is my value is going to be a array, and I should be able to access this through index notation here, right? And so that's cool. Those are my salaries, right? Those are my bonuses. So what I can say is I can take this out of the console.log, and we can do 0, right? And so 0, if we look back, is going to be our salary, is going to be plus equal. And this is where it gets really long, right? Is going to be, just need this. Salary, right? And then this is going to be added to bonus. And then the final one here is going to be just plus equals 1. And that way we're going to increment our count. So now the first time we hit a developer, right, or product manager or designer. So you remember how I said I'm not going to use dot notation, because once we hit this key, because there's a space in there, like it's going to throw it in quotes and make it a string, and you're not able to use dot notation with this. So this will throw us off a little bit further down the track. But the first time we hit it, we're going to create our key with the title, and then we're going to create an array with that employee's salary, their bonus, and we're going to give ourselves a count of 1. Each time we hit that specific key in the future, we're going to access the value. So we're going to access this array, and we're going to add in the next employee's salary, we're going to add in their next bonus, and then we're going to increment the account of employees that make up this object. So let's go ahead and run this again. And I don't know what these numbers total out to, but I believe we want to see 3, 2, and 2 here. Right? So we've covered 3 devs, 2 product managers, and 2 designers. Right? So this was the hardest part of this exercise, was figuring out how to basically tear this apart and build something that holds the information in a way that we find it usable. All right. So any questions about any of the steps that I took in here? And please, if you've got questions, ask them. Other people have the exact same question.
Hey, Charles, I got a quick question. As
Yeah.
far as just knowing which of these numbers that you have in the array, like you kind of just have to keep it in your head, right? There's no like methodical way to know like, hey, this is salary, this is bonus, and all that.
Well, we know because of this, because we're putting it in an array, and arrays have a concrete order, right? So every time I create this array, it's always going to be created in the same order, right? And so, I mean, we could maybe put a note in here saying that like, hey, the 0 index is a salary, the 1 index is bonus, and the 2 index is the employee count. But because we're using good naming with everything, that's the story that this tells.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, we could make it more complicated, right? And turn this into like a nested array or something like that, where we had something that looked like this. Right, but again, this is it makes it more readable when we're looking at the output. But again, we don't ever need to see this output. The only thing that ever really sees this is the computer, and it's going to be the next part of the program that needs to see this object. Because remember, at the end of the day, we want to output something that looks like this, right? And then we're outputting a new object where everything is clearly labeled. Right, so this is just like the intermediate step. But great question, and it's why naming naming things is so important, right? Because like I said, if R of employees was, I mean, cheese sandwich, right, and we called title whatever favorite color, right, that's not helping us figure out what the hell is going on over here, right? So but by using appropriate naming for everything, as we get more experience with this, we can read through this, and this is going to help us determine, like, figure out what's going on, right? Like, so I see up here, I've got an object called parsed employees, right? And so I know that I'm going to be getting an array of employees. So this tells me that this is going to hold some sort of modification of this, right? And so say, okay, if parsed employees has own property, so we know if there is a key in there of this, do this. If there's no key in there, do this. And so this is telling me, hey, from our iteration through the array of employees, I need the titles. I'm going to make them the key, and then I'm going to be storing the salary, the bonus, and a count here, right, inside of an array. And then when I look at this one, it's telling me I'm going to be incrementing the salary, I'm going to be incrementing the bonus, I'm going to be incrementing the count. And the only thing that's not super clear, and what I'd say is, like, we could put a note here that says keeps count of number of employees with this title, right? And so because this is, we're just incrementing a number. And however, we typically want our code to tell the story and not have to put comments in there. You'll write a lot of comments when you're new and you'll be explaining things, but most places, like, once you get to a job, they don't want you writing a comment to describe what's going on. They want your code to be able to tell a clear and convincing story. And so, and I'll leave this in here for now, but as we start to write the next part of this, this note will no longer be needed. Right. Any other questions on what I've done here so far?
Why is product manager returned as a string, but developer and designer?
Because
don't?
there's a space,
I see.
right? So if I were to do something like this, and this will give us 2 now, right? But whenever there is a space in a key, it is automatically given quotes around it, so it's represented as a string, because without the quotes, it will not support a space. And that's all that is.
You couldn't do something in the code to make them all return the same.
Technically I could, but the whole point is, so, and this is also a great question, and this is a concept that comes up. In fact, it's like I said, I interview for my company, and part of the coding challenge, we do this to everyone that interviews at our company. There's some data that we give them that is basically dirty, right? Like, it's not perfect data, and you don't necessarily have control over people's input, right? And so I'm getting this array, let's just say that I'm getting this array of objects from code that already exists, and maybe my company owns it, but a different team owns it. And if I go back to them and tell them, like, hey, like, can you take that space out of product manager? And they can tell me no, right? Because this may be used in a different report where product manager needs to be, basically it needs to be human readable instead of code readable. And so I don't always control my input, and I could write something that goes through the titles and removes any spaces, but it doesn't, like, this doesn't really matter at this point, because again, this is just an intermediary step. And at the end of the day, right, like, I mean, we see here title, total employees, all of the keys are going to be like computer readable here, or code readable, but the value that would be displayed to like your user should be like in basically like human readable form, like proper punctuation, proper spacing, proper capitalization.
Would
So-
you use like regex in a way to delete the space in that kind of scenario?
I would probably, yeah, I mean, you could use regex and a filter to remove the spaces, or like I would split it on spaces and then join it without the spaces, right? So like something like this, I could say, let example equal, right, and then I could say console.log example dot split, right? We'll give it a space, right? So there's that, and then dot join, right? And I'd probably use something like that to take all the spaces out. But because eventually, like, it's a key right now at the intermediary step, but eventually I'm going to be showing this to a human being in a report, and I want it to say product manager correctly. But good question. It brings up like the important topic of, you will always have limitations as a developer on, excuse me, things that you can control, but there'll also be things that you're not able to control, things you're not able to change because you don't own the data. Any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the second half of the pseudo coding. All right, so we now have our basically our object with everything that we need in here. So we now need to extract the information from our object and use it to assemble an object for in our final format. Right, so we're going to need a 4 key value pairs, which is going to be title, and then what else we got here? Average salary, average bonus. They have AVT, but that's should be AVG, average total comp. Right, so for average salary, okay, so that's for that, right? So that is going to be assembling our object. So once we have a fully assembled object, we will need to push that object into an array. Once we are done adding all of our objects, we will need to return the final array. All right, so now, like I said, we've disassembled the array that we were given with all the objects. We've parsed all the information out of it. So now we've got this object, right? We've got parsed employees sitting there as an object, and now we need to assemble a new object for each one of these positions out of this information, and then push that into an array and return our array. So let's say, let's go ahead and do. All right, so let's go ahead and say let.
Hey, Charles, I have a question.
Yes,
So do we not have 5 key value pairs? And because so like the title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, and average total compensation.
you are absolutely correct. I skipped over total employees. 5 KVPs, which will be total employees, display number at index 2, right? And so, yes, thank you. Good catch on that. All right, so let's see here, we'll call this array of, we'll just call it array of title info for now. I can't think of a better name for it. All right, so now we're going to need to iterate through this object, right? By each of the keys, and we're going to assemble it. And so iterate through object JS. I think it's okay, so for n. All right. Right. So for n in an object const property in object, and there it is. So we're going to do a for n loop here. All right, so I don't know if I wrote that. We will need to extract the information in our object and use it to assemble object in our final format with a for in loop. All right, so let's go ahead and start with that. So we're going to say for let position in parsed employees. All right, and let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. Let's go ahead and cancel that return for right now. All right, so developer, product manager, designer, and so that's my key. And if I wrap this and I say parsed employees, there are my values. All right, and so now I am going to need to assemble my objects, right? So I've got, if I do this, right, those are just my salaries. So now what I can say is, I believe that temp object equal this, and we're going to say, take this out of the console log, and we're going to say temp object, and we're going to say average salary. Or actually, I'm sorry. Well, I'll leave this one, but we'll do these in order. I mean, so we can say temp object title is going to be equal to position. And then this is going to be divided by, because we're going to be taking the average, right? And so that is going to be, sorry, I've got an extra parenthesis in there. So the position 0 by the number at 2, index 2, which is the count. And I think I need to do total employees first. So that is going to be this. And that is just going to be this. And we're going to change this to 1 and this to bonus. And then lastly, And this is going to be average total comp. Right, and so let's go ahead and take a look at our object here. So console.log temp object. Right, so that looks like what we want, right? And we can clean up this, so we can say, oh, let's see here. I don't want to change them, so I think I can just wrap these in parse int. Int. So let's see if that takes care of it. Yeah, cool. So we'll wrap each one of these in parse int.
I got another question, Charles, as well. So on that average total comp, if you look at that first developer object, shouldn't it be the average salary plus the average bonus to get the average total compensation?
Yes, and what did I do? Oh, I did
I think
two.
you
So
divided it by the position.
it should be, yeah, 0 and 1. Sorry. So for average total comp, it should be that. That is correct. And that looks better. Yes, good catch. Thank you. So let's do this to put them in order, right? So we're taking salary plus bonus and then dividing it by the number of employees. And, except I'm not doing it right still.
Do you have to divide by the employees because you've already done that?
I am, because I mean, I could probably do this. Oops. There we go. That looks a little bit better. All right, thank you. And so now we have created our temporary object, which is a bad name. So, but we'll leave it at that for right now. And instead of console.logging it, we're actually then going to push it, right? And so we've got array of title info, and we can do array of title info dot push, and then we're going to push our temp object into it, because right now I'm just iterating through and I'm returning each object one after the other, but I still need to return them inside the array, right? And so we can return here, and we're going to return array of title info, and let's see what happens. There we go. Just made me sweat it out. So now we're in an array, and we've got our array of objects with each of the items in here. Clean this up. All right. So any questions on the second half of this is how we reassembled everything, and or now that you've seen the whole thing from start to end, any questions there?
I think it was still the same for me in that first for loop, and how you created the the keys. Is a lot different than how I did it, but the reassembling on the second loop, I fully understand.
Okay, cool. Anyone else on this? All right, so I'm going to rename this to first pass. All right, and so let's go ahead and take a look at some ways that we could possibly clean this up some. All right, and so first off, what strikes me is, and again, I've mentioned this, and like with most of the stuff that we've done so far, it's really only been doing one thing, and this is now doing two very distinct things, right? So like we're ripping apart some input and then we're reassembling output. And so for me, this would be an opportunity to look at making this like cleaning this up a little bit, and possibly breaking this out into some helper methods, and possibly making this like a higher order function, right? And so the first thing we could take a look at doing is breaking apart the first part here, right? So we could do something, let's call this, we'll call employee data disassembler, right? And we'll feed it the R of employees, right? And then do this for right now. We'll just minimize that. And so down here, we're going to write a new function, right? So we can call function employee data disassembler. Right, and we're going to take in a R of employees, and so now we can start pulling things out of here, right? So we don't need a empty array in here anymore, so we can actually take our employee disassembler and make that return our object that we need, right? So we know that down here, we are going to be returning an object. And so now we just need to build out that object. So we can say, let title data equals an empty object, and we're going to return title data. And well, I'm not going to, I'll just keep this the same because, and I'll give that one a different name up there. So we're going to call this parsed please. So that way I don't have to rename everything here, right? And we'll go ahead and grab all of this. Right, and so now we can return this out of here, and because we're calling everything the same, we could even, just trying to think if I want to shorten this up to make it a little bit, nah, I'll just leave it the same for right now. We'll make sure that our function is working, right? And so we'll rename this get employee data second pass, and let's see if we still get something. All right, so we're still working, right? So everything we did over here is still working. And so let's go ahead and do this, That's good. And then what we're going to do now is grab the second part. So let me just collapse this for right now. And this, and we've got the array title info. So we're going to grab all of this. And what do we want to call this function? We can call it employee data. It's like my spelling is all over the place, but and we're going to call this with parsed employees, right? So now we're feeding parsed employees into this, right? And so we can take all of this here and we can cut this out. Oops, don't need last curly brace. Come down here and we'll call our function employee data where and call it parsed employees. This, right? And we can throw all of this in here and we've got our parsed employees. We've got our temporary object, our array of title info here can now be declared inside of this function. So go. Right, and so now we've got all that, and now we can return this. And let's go ahead and run it. And we're still getting the answer. Right, so now we've basically turned get employee data into a higher order function. And we take in one function that we use as a helper method here to basically disassemble everything, and all of our logic is contained in here, and it's all encapsulated in its own thing. And now if we needed to write another function that does this as the first step, and maybe it reassembles the data in a different format for the report, right? Like maybe we want to, instead of looking at average salary, which is what we do in the reassembler, maybe we want to look at like total salary outlay for a title. We could write a similar function that does basically can use this, but then doesn't have to use this. We can use a different type of reassembler to put the information in the new format, right? And so now this becomes a reusable chunk of code, and we don't have to duplicate this code if we want to use it somewhere else to accomplish a similar goal, right? And so now we've got our two functions here. Oops. No, you popped out from, and we've got this as a higher order function, right? And the next thing would be like we could look at, and at this point, like, I mean, I'm not going to try and cram this into a ternary because there's just way too much going on in here for it to be a ternary. We could probably look at pulling out our for loop and doing it as a for of, or doing it as like a dot for each in this case, because we don't need to return anything out of here. We're just performing a set of actions over and over again. But again, I think that would also be unnecessary. I think the for loop is perfectly legible and tells the story we need it to in this situation. Right. So any questions on what I've done by moving these out into their own methods. So, and another thing that we haven't really talked about yet, but you will get into it in Code Platoon, is unit testing. And so when we write unit tests, it's the smallest type of test that you can use. We'll start talking about the testing pyramid, and there's going to be unit tests and integration tests and acceptance testing are like the largest test. But instead of trying to test something that looks like this, that gives me like, I basically, if I wrote a test for this, I'd say, with this information up here, do I get output that looks like this here? And if that test fails, it doesn't tell me if it's failing here or if it's failing here. So it makes it harder to find where something's failing. And again, when there's only two different moving parts here, it's not super hard to figure out where it is, right? Like, we've only got a few lines of code to make it through. But if we have a class that has 50 different functions in it, right, and something's failing, and all we're testing is the start and the end, it makes it hard, especially as we go back and as software lives longer and we make these small incremental changes where maybe something up here happens that we change it, and it's gonna, nothing breaks up here, but it breaks something down here. And so it makes it harder to see where things are actually breaking and what may have caused it. But when we move things out into their own individual functions, I can write a set of tests for this function for my disassembler, and I can write a separate set of tests for my reassembler. And then I can write more tests that test the entire process from start to finish by testing this function, right? So this tests the first half, this tests the second half, this would test the whole thing. And so it just gives you better test coverage, and it makes it easier to find when you change something somewhere where things are breaking, and narrows the breakage down to smaller and smaller parts of the code, which makes them easier to diagnose and easier to fix. All right, so this is pretty much it for the employee data. Are there any other questions that we have about this one? And again, more than happy to answer them. Once we're done talking about this, probably pause here and take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll tackle some other challenges until probably like 8:30, 8:45 tonight. And then leave some time here at the end to, again, any questions, anything else we want to talk about. But I will say, after completing this one, the last hour of the hour and a half of the night will be pretty anticlimactic. This was like the top of the mountain for this class. All right, if no one's got anything for me, I'm gonna go ahead and pause recording here, take a break, and I'll see everyone back at 7:30. All right, there's that. Let's see.
Second to last.
Go. All right, so write a recursive function that takes a number and returns the associated number in the Fibonacci sequence. The sequence begins with 0 and 1, and then the next number at any point in the Fibonacci sequence is formed by adding the previous two numbers together. All right, so let's go ahead and fork this. Let me come over here and grab this. All right, so parameters, we're going to get a number here. So one input, which is number, which is this going to be write a recursive function that takes a number and returns the associated number in the Fibonacci sequence. So 3 is 1, so that's going to be the position of the number is what they're giving us, right? So number, yeah, I think, yeah, it was just recursion left, and I was just thinking, yeah, because we didn't do prime numbers. What's my GPA is not a big deal. Car trip, I don't think is a big deal. Current grade, I mean, they're more they're practice with objects, so we could always take a look at one of those too. Number of characters is good. I mean, we can alternate back and forth here. We'll see if I can survive Fibonacci here. All right, so which is number represents the position of fib number. All right, and we are going to return a number is the number in example is below. All right, so pseudocode on this is going to be something where, let's see here. So pseudocoding for recursion is always a little bit harder, but we've got our base case and our recursive case. Now, we are going to, let me pull this over. We're going to need the Fibonacci sequence here. Yes, don't change these. All right, so with this one, and why this one is harder, and I'll tell you right now, is that we're going to end up like our recursive case is going to require us to call two functions, right? So we're going to have basically we're going to have to call the Fibonacci sequence number like -1 or +1, I can't remember, and then also like a additional one past that. So if we get our base cases, we're always working back to the first position, right? So if we hit 1, so the 1 in the first position, we will return 0, right? Because this is, right, because we're feeding in positions, right? So pause, right, is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And so this is our base case, right? So we're going to decrement and we can't go any lower than this. And so we're going, for our recursive case, we're going to need to call two functions. And so, like I said, I mean, I can solve this where it's basically like we're going to call it with the number we give it with a -1, and then also with a -2. I'm very bad at explaining it. right? And I mean, this is basically the formula. Right. So this is basically the solution right here. And like I said, I've memorized the solution, but being able to explain why it is the way it is, I'm not always the best at it. So the Fibonacci sequence is the integer sequence where the first two terms are 0 and 1, and after that the next term is defined as the sum of the previous two terms, hence the nth term of the sum of n minus 1 and then n minus 2, right? And so this is using it as far as recursion, and so this looks like this would be solving it iteratively, right? And what it looks like, whoops, so we can just gonna plop this in, and then I'm also going to talk about, or I'll show you what it looks like basically. And so we're going to say so that we're going to do this, and we're going to return that, and then else up here. Stop. And we're going to do this and this, and let's run this and see if this gives us what we think it's supposed to. Maximum call stack exceeded. What did I do here? Oops. It's else. So we're not incrementing for both of them. I think that should be it. There we go. So that gave us our answers that we were looking for. But let's grab this and let's take this over to Python tutor. And we'll grab you. So I'll drop the link to that in there. And let's grab, oh, chop you off, and we'll chop you off. All right. So we can see that, I mean, there's 108 steps here, and this is going to get really ugly really quick because of the fact that we have to recurse twice each time through. So we're going to get really large really quick, and we'll see this here, right? So I'm feeding, I want to know what the 7th number is in the Fibonacci sequence, and that is basically the number 8, right? Or I'm sorry, the number 8 is the 7th number. And so if we come back over here, so we're going to call our function with the number 7. So we come up here, we check it against our first base case, and then our second base case. And I mean, right, so because why I wrote this with 2 base cases. It looks like you can do it with just one, but this is kind of the way that I've always solved it. And I think it's because you're going to be running into these at different steps, right? And you've got your 0, your 1, and your 1. And so we don't hit either of the base cases, so we end up down here. Right, and so we're going to call Fibonacci 6. And we're now going to go through that. And then we're going to call 5. And we'll keep going down through here. 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's the return value from just this first one. Right, and now we're going to go into the second one at that very bottom one. So notice how we came down and then went back up, but then had to come back down the call stack again. And we're going to keep seeing it go back and forth because it's one of those things where I think I drew this in an earlier class, but so the first time we call it at 7, right? We then have to call it a second time at 7 minus 1, which is 6, and then 7 minus 2, which is 5. And then for this one, we have to call it at 5 and 4, right? And then this one gets called at 4 and 3. And then we come down here and this one gets called at 4 and 3. Right, and then this one gets called at 3 and 2, right? And so we're going to hit our first base case here with that one, right? And so that one's done. And then from here, we're going to basically call this at 2 and this one's done, and at 1 and this one is done, right? So we're hitting our cases here, but now on this one, we have to call it at 3 and 2, and this one is done. And then we have to call this one at 2, which is done, and 1, which is done. And then the same thing again, 2, which is done, and 1, which is done. And then we come down here and we have to call this one at 2, which is done, and 1, which is done, right? And if I were to try and space this out evenly here, I think this is going to be that, and that, and that. So that 4 is going to be, so this 5 goes down to 4 and 3, 3 and 2, and oh, so I even screwed this one up. So this one's going to be 3 and 2, and that one, right? And then this one goes down into 3 and 2. This one goes down to 2 and 1. This one goes down to 2 and 1. This one's done. This one I screwed up. This goes down to 2 and 1. All right, and so that's done. These are all done. Two, and 2 and 1. Right, and so welcome to the nightmare that is multiple recursion. So, and I don't want to keep adjusting these out, but I mean, like technically these would go over here, but so we can see that when we're at 7 layers deep, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So we had to call that function 24 times to be able to solve it using recursion. And this is just 7 layers deep. What do you think it looks like to do this one? Right. And I don't even know that Python tutor will calculate that. That one may yell at me if I try and go 16 layers. Yep. So stopped after 1,000 steps. Right. And because you're basically like just to go to the 8th level, right? Like if we just brought this to the 8th level up here, right? You would end up with 6 over here, and then you would end up with a similar sized tree, just like one step below, right? And then if we're 9 layers deep, you end up with 2 of these, like an 8 and a 7, and so on and so forth. And it becomes really ugly really quick. So, and again, I'm sorry, I'm not able to explain this one better to you. Like I said, I basically just memorized the solution to the Fibonacci sequence. But like, as far as why it goes that way, like I said, I'll drop this in here. So I will say, if you have more questions, I'm happy to take a stab at them, but I don't know that I will be able to answer it for you. So if you've got any questions on this, then you fire away. Nothing.
Beyond my pay grade, I don't even.
I don't blame you. You're probably over mine at this point too. Like I said, I'm not like, I would not try and solve this one with recursion, right? Like it becomes like I said, like an academic exercise, or that you would run into some, like, I would hope that somebody wouldn't ask you this one specifically, like on a interview question fresh out of a boot camp. Like that honestly would be kind of a jerk move. Like single recursion, that's fine, but something like that, I would hope that they wouldn't do that to you. All right, so I think struggled through that one enough. Let's take a look at number of characters. What does this one do? Yeah, that's a fair response. Write a function that takes a string of lowercase characters and returns an object containing the count for each letter in the string. All right. Yeah, so this one is a good one, and this one is kind of a building block for employee data, right? Where we're going to need to use our if-else statement to handle the first time we run into a letter in the string, and then like we're going to need to do a separate action each subsequent time that we run into that letter, right? So the first time we're going to need to create the key, each time after that, we're going to want to not overwrite the key, but increment it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. And do you guys want to jump into breakout rooms and try and solve this one, or would you like me to walk through it?
I'm good with breakouts.
Yeah, I'm good.
Either way.
Okay. Yeah, so this one, especially here, let me do this. Let me drop this as a reference. And let's see here, we've got 10 people. So let me see what the old breakout room calculator is telling me. Okay, sorry, so 9. Yeah, so we'll do 3 breakout rooms. So we'll do 3 of 3. So I dropped the employee data object array, which kind of, again, is a more advanced version of this. And as a reference, here's the link to this. And then let me grab this. And this is our little prep code block here. And then any questions from me before I send everyone to the breakout room? All right, welcome back. So we're going to go through a number of characters. We've got write a function that takes in a string of lowercase characters and returns an object containing the count for each letter in the string. All right, so we are going to get one input. And we are going to return an object with the KVP of a character and a number of occurrences. All right, example, see below, and pseudocode. All right, so with this one, we are going to get our string, and we are going to need a object to hold our key value pairs of character, number of occurrences. We will then iterate through the string. First time we hit a new letter, we can create the key inside of our object and assign it a value of 1. Each subsequent time we will increment the value by +1. Then we will, return our object. All right. So does this sound pretty close to what everyone else did?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this, again, we've got case A, case B. So this tells me that we're going to need an if-else statement. We're going to iterate through the string. So that means that we're going to need a loop. And then we're going to need an object to hold our key value pairs. All right, so let's go ahead here and say, let object, we'll just call it object here, be empty. So we're going to for let I equal 0 I less than string dot length I plus plus. Let's go ahead and console.log our str I, and let's see if we get all of our characters here. All right, looks good to me. So we're getting into our string and we're iterating through each character. So now what we need to do is same thing as last time. We can take our string I and we're going to wrap that, and for our object we're going to make that a key and we're going to assign it a value of 1. All right, and let's go ahead and return our object. All right, so we're hitting our case, so we're getting all of our letters and we're just assigning a value 1. If we hit them multiple times, because we don't have our subsequent case built out yet, we're not incrementing. All right, so if object has own property, this, and we'll do stri, and so now we're saying if it's already in there, we're going to do object stri plus equals 1. All right, else we've got that. All right, so now we've got our 2 cases. All right, so we've got B 1 time, D 2 times, A 3 times, C 1 time. Right, so 3 A's, 1 B, 1 C, and then 2 D's. All right, so I had mentioned putting this in alphabetical order, and so there is a easy way and a hard way to do this. So if we say sort a string JS, right? This is the easy way to do it, right? And let's see if anyone gave us the long way. Right, so this is using a callback function with sort, with giving it some unnecessary stuff in there, using local compare on string instead of just splitting it into a array. And then there is, and so this is like where we talk about built-ins. Right, so if we didn't split it into an array and use dot sort, this is the code that you would do it to do it specifically on a string. So not necessarily like the easiest or cleanest way to do it. So I recommend that we take the easy way with this one, right? And so I can say string equals string dot split, and let's go ahead and console.log string here, and we'll comment all of this out for right now. Right, so that just puts it into an array. Doing this gives us array with each individual 1. So let's go ahead and do dot sort. All right, so now they're in alphabetical order. And let's go ahead and do dot join. All right, so that gives us commas. If we just give it the empty string, now we get it all as one word. So let's do this. And now we get our keys in alphabetical order. And so, again, not a requirement for this, but it's a nice extra added step. And this one, and I know some of you have completed the application. So this isn't on it anymore. But I think this was one of the ones when I joined Code Platoon, is I basically had to write a function that did all of this in alphabetical order, but wasn't allowed to use the dot sort method. So I had to go the long way and figure out how to write the function to sort everything manually. This is way better. All right, so 8:30. I'll leave it up to you guys. Do we want to try and tackle another challenge, or do we want to call it a little early tonight? No,
Question.
No one wants to be the person that makes everyone else stay an extra half hour. So I guess what I would say is, if there's anyone that wants to do another challenge, I'm happy to do another challenge. And I can keep recording, but if I know the employee data was quite a bit, it's Thursday, it's September, summer is officially over now or something like that. I don't know. Everyone's crying inside a little bit. I'm happy to keep going, but if anyone wants to bounce early, I'm not going to be mad at anyone. And if everyone wants to leave early, that's fine too. But I'll take silence as everyone wants me to do another one. The video I would hope would be up on Friday. At the latest, it would be Tuesday if the person who uploads them doesn't do it before he goes on vacation. All right, let's take a look here. Again, I mean, I don't think I'm going to push anyone back into breakout groups, so I'll probably just tackle one more here, and then we'll go from there. So we just did, what did we just do? Number of characters. Let's look at what is repeated characters. Okay, write a method that takes in an array of characters and a similar length array of integers, returning a string consisting of every character repeated the number of times as indicated in the integer array, with each character corresponding to the number in the same position. All right, that's an interesting one. So let's go ahead and try this one. No, so I think that's either the first time I solved it, or this might be the second time I've looked at this one, but I honestly don't remember this one off the top of my head. All right, so we are going to get these. So let me pull these over here. That and that. All right. Well, at least they're giving it to me in arrays. So let's see here. So it looks like we've got corresponding numbers here. So let's see, we're going to get two arrays, one of characters, the other has number of times to repeat each character in the corresponding index position. And we're going to return a string of repeated characters. Examples, we will say see below. All right, so pseudocode. So we are going to iterate, well, before we even do that, we will need a placeholder for our string of repeated characters. We will need to iterate through both of the arrays at the same time and identify character to repeat and the number of times to repeat it. We will need a nested loop to repeat the number of characters specified time and add them to string to return. And then lastly, we can return our string. All right. And honestly, we can either push these and concat them to a string, or we could push them as elements into an array, right? So we can do oops. How about we do that to example? Right, so we can concat in that manner, or we could push into an array, and then once we're done, we could just do a join and return it as a string. I'll start off doing it this way. All right. Any questions as far as the pseudocode steps that I put in here? I think this will be our first one where we need to use like a nested array here.
I just have a question. What is more typical to use, iterating and then assigning it back to an empty string or to an empty array?
I mean, I would do it at this point as a string because I'm doing one less operation, which is the dot join. But if there was either way is perfectly acceptable. And again, because strings are immutable, there could be like situations where doing it in the array is the more beneficial way to do it, but I don't think that'll be the case in this specific situation because we're just tacking letters onto it. Excuse me.
Thank you.
All right, so let's see here. We'll do let string equal, and we'll make it an empty string. All right, so now I need to, we'll just use for loops here. For let I equal 0, I less than char array dot length, I plus plus, and let's go ahead and console dot log char array I. Why did I do that? Because I've got two R's. That's better. Okay, so we're hitting each of the letters in there. All right, so here is where we hit the so for, let's see here. How are we going to nest this loop? Yes, we could say for let j equal 0, j less than num array I. So we don't need the length here because we're actually counting to a specific number each time. And then say j plus plus, and we'll do that. And now let's go ahead and see if we get multiple occurrences here of each letter. All right, so we get 1A, 2 B's, and 3 C's, and we get hello here, right? So now I can take this out of my console.log and I can say string plus equals this, and now we can return our string. Oh, we get A and H because I am still inside the loop. Let's try that. There we go. A, B, B, C, 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 and hello. All right. Any questions on what I did there? So dot repeat. Okay, so we can feed in the number from the num array into a repeat and do that way. I don't think I've ever used repeat before, so let's go ahead and check that out. All right, so we'll call this one characters 1, and let's do this. So we can pull this out of a nested array, right, and get rid of that, and we can do, just wondering, what are we attaching the repeat to? That it's just going to tack right on there, dot repeat, and then we could say num array I, because they're going to correspond with each other. Let's see what that looks like. All right, looks like that gives us our answers as well. Right, and then same thing here, we could do like a for each here then out of this. So we could say do char array dot for each and say char, then say, just type it up here, string plus equals char dot repeat and num array I. So let's see, this works. Reference error I is not defined because we're not going through that anymore. So this I'm pretty sure I could do dot map. But this is immediately like telling me I would not go this direction. Like, and we just return the number here. Like, yeah, but now it's going to yell at me over this expected. So number array dot map. Those there. So I got empty off that. I got a little too clever for my own good here because when I took the iteration out, I don't know. Yeah, because this is going to go through each one each time. So this would not work. So we would keep it in the for loop because we need it to basically go through both of the arrays at the same time. And that I is helping us keep pace with both of them, but definitely the repeat works there. So there's that one. So now it is 8:46. So probably be done with the challenges for right now. And I will hang out and answer any questions that anyone has, like I said, about anything we've covered throughout the course, anything like that. Kind of next steps, anything else you want to talk about, what it's like to be a software developer, anything along those lines. And I can stop the recording for this part. Well, and I guess before I stop the recording and move to that next part, were there any questions about this either way? Okay.